So everything is going to the edge, and there's a lot pushing to the edge, and that performance and that consumption and that experience has to be very, very crisp. So our core product is tier 1 internet, direct internet access. But what we've been doing is moving up the stack and building so that we are prepared for edge. So a lot of our emerging innovation is really getting better at the edge. It's also around packet innovation. Like, how can you, since you are bound by some of the physical constraints, how do you continue to optimize what we are delivering in our packet quality and throughput and volume, and how do we drive it more to the edge?
I'm sure you've already noticed that nearly every experience in the real world now includes some kind of online continuation or supplementation of the same experience. And as that world trends towards increasing the flow of data, companies like Zayo Group are becoming even more in demand. EVP and CIO Ginna Raahauge and her team at Zayo Group are working hard to stay on the edge of innovation to continue supplying a bigger and faster pipeline to support our interconnected world. This episode is a part of our communications and IT series here at IT Visionaries. Check out the other episodes in the series, including last week's episode with Frederick Nielsen of Access Communications, and look forward to next week's podcast featuring the EVP, CTO, and CIO of Comcast, Rick Riaboli. Enjoy this episode. IT Visionaries is brought to you by Salesforce Platform. If you love the thought leadership on this podcast, Salesforce has even more meaty IT thoughts to chew on. Take your company to the next level with in-depth research and trends right in your inbox. Subscribe to a newsletter tailored to your role at salesforce.com/newsletter. Welcome everyone to another episode of IT Visionaries, and today we have a special guest. She is the EVP and CIO of a company called Zayo Group. If you're in networking like I came from, you for sure know who they are. Ginna Raahauge, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Albert. Thank you for having me and inviting me to be here with you today.
We are stoked to have you here. And it's not often we get to have people on the network side, because most of the time everyone talks about cloud this, cloud that, but we know that most companies actually are not in the cloud. Zayo Group, for the audience that doesn't know what you guys do, tell us, what is Zayo Group? What do you guys do? What is your specialty?
Absolutely. Zayo Group is a global communications infrastructure platform. So what we do is we provide all that mission critical bandwidth to the world's most impactful companies, fueling all of their innovations that are transforming our society. So we have one of the largest footprints in North America and Europe, and it includes metro connectivity. We have thousands of buildings and data centers that we connect, and we also serve all the hyperscalers. So we do know a bit about cloud and connecting them.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they think to themselves, hey, well, I just use the cloud, they don't really think that all the cloud is obviously someone else's computer, and more importantly, someone else's lines. That's how the computers talk to each other, and Zayo Group is doing both. Give us an idea of the innovation that's happening in this space. You know, I'd love to hear a little bit what Zayo Group's up to, what you've been up to personally over the last couple of years in this space, because most of our audience is software based. Like, a lot of people know how to code, they know how to develop software, and they know how to use cloud infrastructure tools or infrastructure tools to spin up hardware and things like that, and provision services. But they don't really think about what goes into the backbone to make this come true. And that's where you play. Give us an idea of the innovations and things that are happening in this space.
Yeah, I think we obviously have all of the core backbone, which would be our fiber network in the ground, but we're doing some pretty amazing things on the waves and wavelengths. We're doing a lot around what we call Cloud Link, and that is our data center connectivity and really creating more of that low latency private connectivity for enterprises to connect to their cloud, their public cloud environments and architectures. The other thing that's really cool, we're working on moving up the stack, as is, I think, a few other companies out there, into what do we want to do working with Starlink? How do we actually get to that more of the space connectivity and the ground stations, and using our waves and our towers for connecting a lot of that other low altitude, or I guess low atmosphere connectivity that Starlink and SpaceX and everybody's starting to chase now.
Yeah, it's weird. It's crazy to think about that like you just said, low atmosphere, right? The innovation that's coming through. Obviously for a company like yours, investing in hardware infrastructure, it's a significant cost. It's much more different than a normal software company, what they would
Mm,
do. Um, Give us an
yeah.
idea of like timelines of innovation for your team, because obviously you have a lot of projects that you're trying to bring to life, but there's limitations, right? There's actual physical limitations to getting these systems in place to connect to low atmosphere internet. Give us an idea of
Yeah.
what innovation looks like at a company like Zayo Group.
Yeah, I think traditional fiber in the ground is definitely long lead times, right? And
Yeah.
you would know that from your background as well, and some of the networking. But what we are seeing on our wavelengths is we are actually able to speed that up quite a bit. And the innovation timelines, really, we just released one of the first 800G optical wave using our partners. So we have a lot of strong partnerships with providers like Ciena and Infinera that are helping us with the innovations and helping us increase our time to market on those innovations. And I think it's really more around the collaborative design and the collaborative engineering that allows that, where we can give them very fast feedback on what they need to do from their side of the house that we're using in our architectures to deploy these advanced services. So we are seeing some of the way we collaborate and the way that we're doing joint engineering, speeding up those time to capabilities. But there is still going to be some lead times in there and just getting those cycles, because these are emerging technologies as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
it's not like it's all really well understood. The traditional side of things that we're trying to apply is a lot more, just looking at our ability and our supply chain. How do we speed things up? How do we plan better so that we are building faster than when the demand is needed and when that bandwidth is needed or that route's needed? And I think there's some innovations that are going on in the construction, the way that we're doing our construction, the way that we're maybe securing some of our locations in the ILAs and our POPs as well. So we're looking at some new technology for access. So how do we deploy more IoT, RFID, biometrics so that the field teams don't get hung up? Because a lot of times that's where the construction slows down, is they just get hung up and they end up waiting a lot for access to physical access for things.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I can see
Yeah.
that being a huge problem. Give us an
Yeah.
idea, because you have a unique seat, which is Zayo Group obviously serves many other CIOs and CTOs who are trying to build new applications. What
Yeah.
what are you seeing in regards to like market demand? Because like that they are all going to be centering on you, because when we're consumers, like on the consumer side, we can kind of get an idea of how much bandwidth and how much speed is needed when we think of things like streaming, when we think of hybrid work, the fact that we're talking
Hmm.
tools like this tool we're using today, Riverside, is talking back and forth between all these endpoints all the
Yeah.
time. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm imagining there's no CIO that comes out and says, "Oh yeah, we're good." They all want more speed, more process. Yeah, you haven't met them yet, but that CIO is like, "No, we're good. We're good."
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. So what is like
Just,
the
just when, yeah, I was just going to say, just when you think you're good, COVID hits.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and then we're
Yeah. So,
supporting our own internal network. We're now supporting across all networks. You kind of hinted at it with the fact that infrastructure requires partnerships. Nobody owns end-to-end infrastructure.
yeah.
Certainly not across the whole country, right? Like it's not possible.
Hmm.
So you need key
Hmm.
partnerships. But give us an idea of what are CIOs asking for? What are they pushing for? And what kind of cutting edge innovations are you seeing? Because you guys kind of get it like a preview of what's
Yeah.
about to happen.
Let me start with how we use our own infrastructure and network services and where our product roadmaps are really moving up the stack. And we are a big consumer, so we have a huge Zayo on Zayo footprint. A lot of things that we see is focus and requests around security. They want more security
Mm.
embedded really at that network and fiber layer or the wave layer, as opposed to relying on more of the traditional BOM structure or what you would put in your data center to manage and wrapping security around. They really want to see that embedded. So some of our DDoS services, we use that 100% across our corporate and our product. network and infrastructure as well, and how we run both enterprise applications to how we're actually making sure our product development cycles are also secure. So I do see a lot around security. There's a lot of demand. Like I am pushing the product team all the time for SD-WAN and better, more elegant SD-WAN solutions. I think we run SD-WAN, but it's come a long way, and there's better ways to do it with the virtualization that's been happening in all of our on-prem data centers, as well as what the cloud offers from a virtualization. So that's one. And then we're always under cost optimization pressure. So how do we actually do and provide more digital services, but at lower and lower costs? So the cost optimization around that data center connectivity, whether you're in an on-prem situation and footprint, or you're in a hybrid, or you're even in a multi-cloud architecture. So the architectures are changing pretty rapidly, and there's a lot of pressure. I have the same pressure around cost optimization all the time, right? And we want to save those dollars so that we can continue to drive more innovation and emerging tech into our architectures. So I would say that's what I'm living, and that's also what we hear from our customer base.
And then when you think of, so like there was two things that I heard there that software certainly is going to be a big part of, which is the one, for example, like you said, security. So you're probably implementing tons of security measures, to protect, like you said, from DDoS attacks or just data encryption, obfuscation. I don't know. There's probably so many things I can't even think about right now that you guys are trying to invest in. And I was thinking, and then also probably software-defined network routing or like network spin-ups to move traffic faster, cheaper. I mean, how much less expensive is it going to get in the next 5 years? Because I know the demand to egress and ingress and send data across the country, that's only going to go up with automation, everything, IoT. We already talk about what would it take to stream. We've had a couple of autonomous vehicle companies on our show before, and they talk about, who's going to do the computing? It's going to collect the data. It's going to compute at the cloud. It's going to compute at the edge. Is it going to compute in the vehicle? Whatever it is, it's going to be moving tons of data super fast, and they're going to say, Zayo, move it faster, cheaper.
Exactly. And it's not necessarily just moving the data in a static way. So if you think about what's going on in the world, 5G, there's a ton more consumption and speed that's coming across that, but we don't have the coverage fully that we need yet, right? So there's still, the big carriers are still working on their coverage maps and how to get that performance and reliability down. And when you think about autonomous vehicles, I mean, you're driving a car at 80, maybe faster miles an hour, and that is moving from tower to tower to tower. It has to be very, very reliable. It has to be very safe and secure. And I think that's what we see a lot in the security aspect of things, but also that consumption and the performance of that to those handoffs have to be seamless. It's not just taking massive amounts of data ingress, egress, and running them over a fiber line. It really is in the air and in across those wave networks, or maybe even some of those low atmosphere networks, right? And the performance of that has to be stellar, especially in areas that maybe do not have a lot of coverage. That's where the low atmosphere is trying to fill that gap.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about when I heard that is, someone once told me that one of the biggest limitations to having a more robust, better network is actually government permitting, like the ability to build a tower, the ability to provision a tower or dig a line to connect to endpoints is actually getting quite expensive, or let's say the process takes too long. Even if it was okay, you can't speed up the process for permitting and stuff. So you're talking about low atmosphere. There's obviously, I don't know. I don't think Space Force is regulating it yet, but I'm assuming.
Yeah. They might be though soon.
How
So true.
is that something that's on our horizon where it's like, for example, I'm there's remote places that are, I'm about to
Yeah.
go to Costa Rica, for example. There's plenty of places that don't have paved roads. Do you see a future where people are just going to be able to move things via satellite into position and just provide internet to entire populations and communities?
It could be that low atmosphere satellite link and mesh network. But I also see, and it's interesting, you're going to Costa Rica. I went to Costa Rica probably 15 years ago, and I had the best coverage hiking in the jungle in Costa Rica than I've ever had anywhere else around the world. It was amazing. Now, they are doing that and did that. That was 15 years ago. They had a lot of towers. And so I think you can get it from towers. And just remember, low atmosphere, you still need to connect and downlink to a ground station somewhere. And that's
That's
usually
true.
a tower that then is processing and doing those handoffs across the waves. So just because it's up there, and I think Starlink has proven they can get it up there, it is exactly what you just mentioned. It is getting it downlinked into a ground station that then it can traverse across so that that connectivity stays up with it. So the uplink and downlink are really, really important aspects of this architecture, and it being able to be really reliable and really resilient, and so that you can have more connectivity. You'll have to tell me when you go to Costa Rica what your experience there is. I was really impressed with how much connectivity I got and how much coverage they had. And I think back to the government, it is up to the government regulation to decide and make those decisions for their own GDP of what that looks like and how they want to build their own infrastructure out there. Costa Rica had an amazing infrastructure, and I think the U.S. is definitely getting there. Europe is getting there, but there is a lot of regulatory loopholes. And one of the advantages of looking at that is who already has a solid footprint of those ground station or of those real estate rights for those towers is really important. And Zayo, we're lucky, we're fortunate that our founder and the vision was to really build out the footprint and gain all of those rights early in the days. Building new towers definitely comes with its own challenges. And like you said, speeding up permitting, hopefully we can digitize more and more of the regulatory side, no matter where we are.
Yeah.
So we can speed that up. But yeah, it is important what kind of footprint you have.
Yeah, the place I'm going to is a town called Pavones, and there's no paved roads in there. So I'm going to fly to a town called Golfito in like a puddle jumper, and then from there, it's bumpy roads all the way in. But they've told me there's internet there, so I don't know. We'll find out.
There is. Yeah, there is. Well, you get back to me on that and let me know. Let me know what you find. I'd be a good comparison, compare and contrast from then to now. But you're gonna have a great time. It's a great place to be, and it's very connected.
Yeah, I found that out. To your point, I did. For those who have not traveled internationally, it's almost as if they skipped the desktop world. They skipped desktops.
Yeah.
Like so many countries, like they went straight to mobile phones, or they jumped desktops and went into mobile phones, mobile payments. It's pretty crazy. I remember when there was peer-to-peer payments here in America, but my friend, I have family in Taiwan. That's a developed nation. But then when I went to like El Salvador or Costa Rica, like they were already doing it. And I was like, well, you know what I mean? Like I was still at the stage, like, I don't trust this. I'm not sending the money.
Yeah. Well, I would even say you see a lot of that in the Middle Eastern countries as well. Africa, some of the countries there, they did skip. They didn't need to go through the traditional way of getting that connectivity, which is what's driving, back to your original question and point, that's driving a lot more demand, consumption, and expectation of how that performs.
So how does that change for you? Because because consumers obviously change very quickly, right? Consumer appetites and demands, they're always changing super fast. I think the genie's already out of the bottle, right? Or the toothpaste is out too, however you want to phrase it. Like no one's going back to less data. That's not happening. Like people are going to constantly want high bandwidth applications. It seems to be what we like, right? We like streaming television. We like playing games, multiplayer games where we're all tapping into the same world across the whole world. We're watching online concerts, streaming from one point to all these other endpoints. So the genie's out. It's never coming back. You're always going to from here. And then And we had a CIO from Fox Sports on talking about how like the
Yeah.
cameras now today are projecting images instead of
Yeah.
4K. It's already gone to like 8K, like and then
Yeah.
10K,
Yeah.
20K. Before you know, it's going to be even more intense. What does that
Yeah.
mean for you guys though? Because you mentioned like you have physical constraints, you have partner constraints, you possibly government constraints, but
Mhm.
consumers obviously don't think like that. They just
Yeah.
they're not concerned about, they want everything faster, sooner, and like you said, faster,
Yeah.
cheaper. What is that? So like, give us an idea, like the pace of innovation on your team. Is it constantly pushing? Is it like every day you walk in and all your engineers and developers like, hey, we got to go faster? It's like they just did something faster. Like, oh,
Yeah.
how do we go faster?
So everything is going to the edge, right? And there's a lot pushing to the edge, and that performance and that consumption and that experience has to be very, very crisp. So when you think about where our product, so our core product is tier one internet, direct internet access. But what we've been doing is moving up the stack and building so that we are prepared for edge. So a lot of our emerging innovation is really getting better at the edge. It's also around packet innovation. Like, how can you, since you are bound by some of the physical constraints, how do you continue to optimize what we are delivering in our packet quality and throughput and volume, and how do we drive it more to the edge? We're thinking about our edge footprint as we're building a mix of assets and pulling into that. The teams right now, they're working on a lot of and I'll give you an example. We were helping one of our customers, it's a retail customer, and with COVID, they were doing a lot of curbside delivery, and everybody kind of changed it. Well, the point of service that they need to check it out and have the customer and their consumer sign off that they received the packet, and maybe even doing some satisfaction surveys, they would lose connectivity as soon as they went into the parking lot because their mesh
Mm.
Wi-Fi network didn't go into the parking lot for traditional reasons. You didn't want people sitting in the parking lot using your Wi-Fi. And so our teams on the product side, they've really come up with some great innovations and POCs on how do we actually use 5G Wi-Fi offload to create a bigger mesh to cover their real estate, but also drive more deep security in that. And that way, their point of sale or their POS systems could work seamlessly, both for their internal users, but also for the consumers that they serve. And I think those are some interesting technologies and innovations in what we're doing. And our product teams looked at that 5G Wi-Fi offload, and they put that solution together pretty quickly. So it's about using our assets differently, as well as where technology is going to the edge and how we pull those solutions together in bundles that we then can offer a new service or something they may not have even thought about. And you talk about the EV industry, so there's a lot of EV charging stations going up. We're trying to figure out, instead of a physical building or coming into a building of a floor of a building, how do we actually connect other physical assets like EV chargers to create mesh networks? And what will that serve, consumer and or enterprise? So we have some enterprise solutions for retail that are pretty compelling right now in what we're doing. And then our 5G Wi-Fi offload, we actually put in our own buildings as well. So I could get rid of the Wi-Fi coverage blips that you have in your normal access points. There's always some wall, concrete beam, or something that blocks it. The 5G Wi-Fi offload, we have it just in the top of our building, and it serves all of our floors. It's pretty amazing. So what they came up with is pretty compelling.
Your shopping center retailer example just got me thinking about how there are just certain
Yeah.
things we as consumers just take for granted. Prior to, 2019, 2020, would anyone think
Yeah.
that there'd be more devices idling outside your store than inside your store? Probably not. I don't think anyone thought that that was a reasonable thing. right? And then
Exactly.
and then I'm thinking right now about how, okay, so now that's a truth, right? Then I'm thinking about how we had someone from professional sports talk about how expensive it was to network up all the equipment so that everyone at the game could share their
Yeah.
experience online. And they told us like just the hardware alone to do this was millions of dollars. And I was thinking to myself, like, how much, because like that's exactly what a business would do. They'd be like, how much money are we
Yeah.
losing? How
Yeah.
much do we stand to
Yeah.
make to drop all this
Yeah.
equipment? Because it's like you said, it can't get there without hard costs and equipment. And it's just one of those things like and then you do that, right? You multiply that across all your stores. And it's like, this is a serious
Yeah.
investment. It just shows how much consumer demand for connectivity really is. Like it's going to dictate how the business invests in its CapEx.
Yeah. And I think that's where 5G serves a very viable purpose, right? But we're still very early days
Yeah.
in that 5G footprint, and the use cases are coming up very, very fast, and we know what the benefits are going to be. I mean, I myself am a consumer, and I have season tickets, and we had a new stadium built, and when that stadium was built, it took them forever to kind of figure this out. And you think about how much faster to solve the problem and build it out in a cheaper way, a 5G type of footprint or Wi-Fi offload is today than when they built the stadium. Probably 6 years ago they built the stadium, and it was all real big capital expenditure with some opex along with it. Those are the things you talked. You asked a little bit about the cost optimization and the pressure and the demand, right? And this is where you use 5G technology to do it instead of traditional fiber lines to come in and big data centers in the basement of the stadiums to serve that up. I also previously worked at a cloud provider, one of the hyperscalers, well known. And when you think about that sports experience
Yeah.
and the fan base and the interaction, and they just keep putting more and more really robust real-time analytics on the players. So when the play is made, you can see exactly all their demographics because they're wearing a lot of the stuff that's
Sensors or
feeding up the
yeah.
data, the sensors, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just think about the consumption and the bandwidth and the performance of the bandwidth, whether it's waves or whether it's, something a little higher than waves or in the ground, what you need. And that coverage to process that data ingress, egress at speeds we've never seen before, because it's instantaneous fan experience in the stadium right there that then you get to interact with.
You know what? It's pretty cool living where I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is
Yeah.
our local sports team is the Carolina Hurricanes hockey team, which is owned by Tom Dundon, who is one of the lead investors in Top Golf. So he knows a lot about integrated
There you
entertainment.
go.
And so
Yes.
we met with some of the people that are in charge of the fan experience, and they talked about how like the digital experience is
Yes.
like, whether you believe in metaverse or whether you believe in physical has now
Right.
merged. Like there's a part of it that's like somehow merged now. And like he was talking about how most young fans will not have fun if there's not a way for them to share it abroad. Like,
Yeah.
and it was kind of like taken aback. Like, cause if you told me I wasn't allowed to tweet or send a video from a game, I
Right.
wouldn't care. I'd be like, that's fine. Right. But like these
Right.
people, like the younger generation is so ingrained, like this is their experience. So like they would
Yeah.
like they're not happy with seeing a goal. They want to see themselves videotaping or streaming the goal to their friends. And because he talked about why they made the decision to invest in all that hardware to make these experiences come true, which is pretty wild that our consumer demand for your services have gotten to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you've mentioned metaverse. I mean, this whole augmented virtual reality, it's accelerating, and technology, the hype cycles of technology and how you drive more speed. I came out of the chip industry, so driving more speed in the nano chips, and it just got smaller, smaller, faster, faster,
Yeah.
more powerful, right? And it's still going on. That's what we're starting to see, and I think we're now calling it a metaverse, but AR, VR was a little misunderstood in the beginning, but that's what it's feeding into. And now we're seeing that hype cycle of that digital twin, the immersive experience. I want to be watching the game and also feel like I'm on the field with them in the team, doing the goal, right? I mean, I think this is where this crossover, and you said it, it's a collision of physical and virtual or digital experiences that are happening. And it is happening in certain verticals much more quickly, like sports,
Yeah,
right?
sports and entertainment for
Um,
sure. Like I
yeah,
went to
yeah,
I went to Top Golf's like top competitor, which is there's another company called Drive Shack, and
yeah,
I'm telling you, my kids had less fun. They legitimately had less
yeah,
fun because the
really.
screens weren't as accurate. Even though shooting
Yeah,
golf into these giant holes is the same, like you would think that's the
yeah,
same. Now that's fun.
yeah,
But what they really enjoyed was instantly looking up, seeing their shot tracked, the data,
yeah,
how fast, how far. They legitimately
yeah,
came back and like, this is not as fun. I'm like, what do you mean? And it's like, like we're hitting golf
yeah,
balls. They're like, no, it's not
yeah,
as fun. And their screens
yeah,
were either delayed on a lag or so like that next wave of
yeah,
consumer, there is no difference like that. The digital experience will be
yeah.
part of everything.
Yeah, there's zero tolerance for the blips that we would possibly. I mean, I even find myself like I'll try and go into something, I maybe Google something, and if it's not coming up, I'm like on to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
And so these new generations of talent and our kids. I mean, I have a 18-year-old son who's graduating high school, but I just look at he's cloud native. He doesn't really understand the old networking infrastructure on-prem architectures that we have grown up with through our careers, and also just the clunkiness and the latency that we had to tolerate. It's just zero tolerance for any kind of latency.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah,
One of the things
yeah,
we also want to share with our listeners is a little bit about yourself. You've had an awesome career. You've done a lot of cool stuff. And for anyone who wants to check out Ginna's story, she's been
yeah,
CTO, CIO. I mean, she's been working at some killer companies.
yeah.
Anyone can look that up. And you've
Thank you.
also served as looks like an advisor, at least technology advisor board member at Greylock, which is one of the most successful venture firms. Give us an
Yeah.
idea. How did you? And I see you were a consultant for PeopleSoft in '97. I myself was a consultant for
Yeah.
PeopleSoft, so I was like, "Geez, like,
Oh, yeah. We're
how did?"
dating ourselves now, aren't we?
Yeah, talk about your road to tech. How did you get involved in this space? So we said we also looked you up. We see you went to MIT, so obviously you've been very smart and probably leaning towards STEM for a good majority of your adult life. But how did you first get into technology?
Well, it's actually kind of interesting, and I will go back to my childhood. So, both my parents were in tech. My dad was a COBOL programmer. My mom was a key punch operator, and she was a tape librarian for the data center
Mm.
of a big mining company, very popular, still around today, BHP mining. And it's interesting because you grow up around your parents and independent kids. I was the oldest. I'm going to go out and make my own name. I actually chose not to do tech, and just just a little resistance,
Yeah.
a little spitfire. I'm like, I'm not gonna be like my parents, but I was around like the first modem. My dad brought home the first modem. My dad actually wrote the program that automated a Caterpillar, so they didn't have to send guys into a big Caterpillar machine to go into the mines that are pretty dangerous at times. And he automated it and said, yeah, we don't need to send any. So that was kind of the first trickling of autonomous anything, right? Is trying to write these programs in very early days. But I actually went and got a business degree, and I started on the business side. But always you have just different aptitudes, and that actually served me very well to be on
Hmm.
the business side. Then I started becoming more, I had a technology aptitude and I could translate business requirements into technical requirements really well. So then I actually was shadow IT. So I worked for a lot of functions that I was really doing some of that business requirement translation, system integration mapping, and data management mapping and stuff like that. So I'd say about a third of my career I started in the business, and then I started doing ERP implementations. And that's actually how I came to PeopleSoft is we were doing an implementation. My company merged. I was in shadow IT, and they said, you're really good at the big application mapping and taking legacy systems and moving them over and actually doing some of the coding and testing and stuff like that. why don't you come work for us on our professional services? And got amazing experience doing that early in my career. I saw a lot of company programs. It was really like going and getting a PhD in business and in technology at the same time, doing the professional services route. And then the last 2/3 of my career have really been in the tech side. Then I became full fledged, moved out of the shadow IT into IT, and I've done a ton of things. I've had to stand up. One of the most notable things that a lot of people said I wasn't going to be successful because I didn't come from the infrastructure ranks, but I knew how to build really good teams. And I knew how to hire really good engineers and just learn as much as I could from them. But when Palm, one of the first
Oh
handhelds and
yeah.
one of the first application stores that was there before Apple had their app store. I was there, and the company was splitting because we had very valuable software assets on the application side and the OS side. And Wall Street gave us a lot of pressure around, what are you, a hardware company or a software company? So I was part of the carve out team. We ended up splitting the company and spinning off the software side. I was smart enough back then to go with the software side because we re-IPO'd. And just really understanding software is eating the world and looking at it. It was very early in the days, but one of my biggest infrastructure programs there is I had 12 weeks to build an entire infrastructure to get off of Palm's parent, the hardware company's very large, costly data center architecture and footprint. And I had to build out architecture for 2 R&D centers, one in France overseas and one in the US. And we did it. And I listened to some really brilliant people. And we actually didn't do it over lease lines. We actually stood it up in 12 weeks all over VPN. And VPN at that time was very early days and maybe not as reliable. But it fit my budget. It was low cost. I couldn't afford the lead times on lease lines, nor the cost of lease lines. So I'm like, well, I have no choice. I got to take this risk. It was a calculated risk that paid off hugely. And then from there, we ended up getting bought, and I went into a networking company. So I went to Cisco.
When I hear your story, I just think to myself, your 12 weeks is actually shorter than that, because if you're running everything over VPN, that's like carving out at least probably, I don't know, like a week and a half right there. Like you
Right?
have to have everything crossed and ready to go probably in, like you said, less than 11 weeks, because if you
Yeah.
said you transferred it all in one shot, like that would have taken
Yeah.
some time. That was not going to be
Yeah.
a fast upload down, rebuild in any way whatsoever.
It was not at all. But, so you start to see how technology at the edge was there even back then, right? In the late 90s and whatnot. But it's kind of funny. I've come full circle. I've seen a lot of things, and I was very fortunate that my parents exposed me to a lot of things. They took me into work on the weekends all the time because they always had weekend work. So I remember playing on the key punch machines. So I've seen tech and tech cycles. Not that I've always chose tech, but definitely have a tech mind, and it chose me. And I haven't looked back the other 2/3 of my career. It's been great, and learning being at a cloud provider and learning.
Yeah.
Really being a solution architecture leader and having to build those solutions and running those engineering teams, just tremendous amount of learning, and I'm very grateful for those experiences.
Yeah, the when you were talking about following your mom in the tape records,
Yeah.
my mom did the same thing. I actually, one of my
Awesome.
earliest memories is I reached up at one of the keys and I turned something off, and it like lost all of its recording. And my mom, I remember like it was a terrible day for her, but like I'm a little kid.
Yeah.
Like you show a little kid a key, like he's gonna turn it. Like that's a fact.
Yeah. That is a fact. Exactly. And that's why we lock data centers down and
Because
have
adults
more
are
and
the
more
same.
cameras. Yeah.
Because
I
adults.
think that's where that must be where the phrase data centers should be dark came from. Not dark because they've been turned off by a little kid, but dark because nobody should be in there, right?
No doubt about it. Well, Ginna, it was awesome having you on our show, and thanks for sharing so much about what you're up to at Zayo, what you see for the future, and also a little bit about yourself, before, how you got into tech. But before you go, it is time for the lightning round. The lightning round is brought to us by Salesforce Platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Ginna, this is where we ask you questions outside of the world of work so our audience can get to know you a little better. You ready?
I am ready.
All right.
I love lightning round.
All right. You mentioned you have a son that is about 18 years old. Does he know or think you're a big deal?
That is a question I'm going to ask him at dinner tonight. It's funny. He should, because during COVID, he's been in the house with me when he was online, and he does now. I would say earlier days he probably didn't quite understand, but listening to all of my calls back to back to back and my Zooms, he'll actually sit on my couch in my office and listen. And he's like, "Are you still on a call? Are you still on camera?" And what's going on. So I think he does now, and he appreciates it now. But that is a great question. I'll confirm that tonight.
Sounds good. What do you like doing outside of work?
Oh, I love just being with my family, being in Colorado. So I'm based in Colorado now. I've been here 6 years. We love going for hikes. We're really big snowboarders, and we've always been wakeboarders. So I've had a boat and wakeboarded for many, many years. I have one of the very first wakeboards that was ever built.
Can you do any tricks?
I can do some tricks, but I'm not a pro. I'm too old for that. I've taken quite a few hard falls. So I kind of am a little more low-key wakeboarder now.
If someone wants to get into wakeboarding, what's something you'd recommend they do?
Well, snowboarding helps. It's just snowboarding, you lean more forward, wakeboarding, you lean back, but the fundamentals are the same on the board, and the posture and the way that you want to use your hips to make the turns and do the tricks and the flips and whatnot. So that's always good. And make sure you know how to swim and you're not afraid of water.
Ginna, I can say without a doubt you are the first female CIO, snowboarder, and wakeboarder we have ever had on ITVisionaries. It was awesome having you on the show. Tell your son I am a big deal and I'm cool, okay?
I will, and I'll tell him Albert said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Listen, it's always fun the story repeats itself. A lot of the great CIOs that we've had on the show, they always have outdoor activities. It's like that stereotype has to be broken by now. If you listen to the show, there is no way the top leaders in tech that's not all they do. That's for sure.
Nope. That's not all we do. Not all we do at all. And we're always looking for some place that is not connected. That's the other thing.
There you go. Ginna, it was awesome again having you on ITVisionaries. You were a great interview. Your story is awesome. I love what your perspective on what's happening in the world and the needs for connectivity. And thanks for sharing so much about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your interest in Zayo. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for watching. Subscribe to this channel for more great IT thought leadership. And thanks to our partners at Salesforce Platform for making this show possible. Go to salesforce.com/newsletter to discover timely insights and useful tips tailored to your role.